Hello, everyone. This is a summary or overview of Plato's Apology, which is an account of Socrates' defense at his trial, the trial that doesn't go so well for him. Anyway, I think the Apology is a great reading because you learn a lot about the life and work of Socrates, but you also get a nice job description of a philosopher or what it means to do philosophy. So let's go ahead and jump in. And immediately we encounter Socrates giving his defense. He makes a distinction between the accusations that come earlier and later. And so he first wants to address the older accusers or the old accusations. He sums up these accusations here in this highlighted section by saying, quote, Socrates is an evildoer and a curious person who searches into things under the earth and in heaven, and he makes the worse appear the better cause, and he teaches the aforesaid doctrines to others. In short, this accusation means that Socrates is engaging in meaningless speculation, and when it says he makes the worse appear the better, it means he's using his rhetorical skills to convince others of these falsehoods. So that's the accusation. He flatly denies this accusation, but he also, down below, considers that there are probably some people in the audience that are wondering, well, if there's no truth to these accusations, then why are you even here, Socrates? There must be something you're doing wrong that brought you to trial. So he says, I'm going to go ahead and take up this challenge and tell you about my work and what has led me here. And he goes all the way back to his friend Chaerephon when Chaerephon goes to the oracle at Delphi to ask the oracle a question. So the oracle at Delphi is a temple in Athens where people would go to learn their fortunes or get information from the gods. And Chaerephon went there asking the prophetess who was there at the temple, who is the wisest person in Athens? And the prophetess, or the gods, answered Socrates. Now this surprises Chaerephon, and he goes back to tell Socrates, and of course it surprises Socrates as well. Socrates, believing that the gods don't lie, nevertheless thinks he's going to go ahead and try and test this claim. And he develops this method of questioning where he's going to interview the so-called wise people in Athens and determine whether or not they're really wise. So, as you can imagine, he doesn't make many friends doing this, but he comes to the conclusion here highlighted below. So I left him, this wise person, saying to myself as I went away, well, although I do not suppose that either of us knows anything really beautiful and good, I am better off than he is, for he knows nothing, and thinks that he knows. I neither know nor think that I know. In this latter particular, then I seem to have slightly the advantage of him. So what he's saying here is, actually, you may have heard this quote before about Socrates, that he says, I know that I do not know. This is what makes him wiser, at least in this reading. The idea is that he knows nothing. The people in Athens know nothing or very little. But the one thing that sets him apart from them is that he knows that he doesn't know. And so that makes him wiser. So he concludes this section by saying, the result of my mission was just this. I found that the men most in repute were all but the most foolish, and that others, less esteemed, were really wiser and better. Okay, moving on. He mentions that he's made a few enemies by interviewing people this way, but he's attracted a few people as well, and these happen to be the young men or the youth of Athens, the young men of the richer classes, who are attracted to his teachings, but they're also imitating him. They're going around Athens and doing the same thing that he is doing now, and interviewing those in authority and challenging them, and that's annoying people. And so those people are starting to blame Socrates for how he's corrupting the youth. So this is a segue into the next charge, the accusation, the more recent one. This is the accusation that actually brought him to trial in this case. So he sums up this accusation in this way. He says, it says that Socrates is a doer of evil, who corrupts the youth, and who does not believe in the gods of the state, but has other new divinities of his own. So he now turns to Miletus, the person who brings these charges, and starts to ask him questions. So this is what they do in a trial like this, and I'm just giving you the highlights of this exchange, But his first question is to Meletus, do not the good do their neighbors good, and the bad do them evil? Meletus answers, certainly. Socrates asks, and when you accuse me of corrupting and deteriorating the youth, do you allege that I corrupt them intentionally or unintentionally? And Meletus answers, intentionally. So Socrates concludes, am I at my age in such darkness and ignorance as not to know that if a man with whom I have to live is corrupted by me, I am very likely to be harmed by him, and yet I corrupt him, and intentionally too, so you say? So what he's claiming here is that these accusations are just ridiculous. What Meletus, he's saying, is claiming is that Socrates is corrupting people, making them bad, which makes them a danger or harmful to himself. And he's doing this intentionally. He thinks that's ridiculous. This charge cannot stick. At most, Socrates thinks that he might be doing it unintentionally, but in that case, he says, the response should not be punishment, but instruction. Okay, and then he turns to the second accusation, that of atheism. He asks Meletus to clarify, are you saying that I just don't believe in the gods of Athens, or am I a complete atheist? And Meletus answers, you're a complete atheist. So Socrates responds in the following way. He asks Meletus, did ever man believe in the existence of human beings and not of human beings? And Meletus says no. And Socrates then says, well, yet if I believe in divine beings or divine things, how can I help believing in spirits or demigods? So in other words, Socrates says, look, I do believe in spiritual things, so there must be a spiritual reality, there must be gods. I do believe in the gods. I deny the accusation. All right, so next section, he's answered those accusations, but he also considers that some people in the audience might say, are you not ashamed, Socrates, that you've led this life that has led you to this trial and possibly to this death? To him, Socrates answers, I may fairly answer, there you are mistaken. A man who is good for anything ought not to calculate the chance of living or dying. He ought only to consider whether in doing anything he is doing right or wrong. So in other words, Socrates is saying, good people don't consider the consequences of their actions. They just consider whether their actions are right. And this leads us to where Socrates compares himself to an insect. So a gadfly is a pesky insect. And Socrates says of himself, I am that gadfly, which God has attached to the state. And all day long and in all places, I am always fastening upon you, arousing and persuading and reproaching you. You will not easily find another like me, and therefore I would advise you to spare me. So, in other words, he thinks he's an annoying insect, but he's not, engaging in this just to be annoying. He's engaging in this lifestyle, these practices, to help his fellow Athenians think more carefully, and think more carefully so that they can live a better life and create a better society. He thinks of himself as a prophet. He thinks of himself at least as a teacher, and he begs them not to find him guilty, at least not to execute him, because he thinks they're not going to find somebody like him very easily. So anyways, I hope you found this overview helpful. There's more to the dialogue, the discussion, but I'm just going to stop there and leave it at that.